So I think it's definitely a very interesting thing to date someone outside of your culture. I think it's also a very complicated thing to date somebody outside of your culture, and which is what I've been doing for most of my life, and which is what I'm doing now. You do really get to understand what drives you in a way, right? Like you really get to start thinking about how do you communicate, how do you express yourself. It's an interesting experience for that. I mean, I would definitely suggest it. Again, there's certain cultures for me that are more compatible than other cultures.
It's gonna be a really neat behind the scenes.
And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so weird.
Because something always magical happens.
Wait, what? Did you just make that up? Hey, it's Meredith for Real, the Curious Introvert. Listen each week as I talk with someone new. The topics are as ADD as I am, but they'll inspire you to stay curious and grow. Big thanks to our location sponsor, the UWF Historical Trust.
Hey, Curiositors, it's me, Meredith. Welcome to the first episode in my love and relationship series. There's this Chinese proverb that says, if you want to know about water, don't ask a fish. The idea is that the fish has never lived outside the water, so it has no perspective or language to describe it. Well, this is the quote I totally goofed up in my chat with this week's guest, but the point remains. One of my objectives with this podcast overall is to broaden the worldview of the listener with bright, meaningful entertainment. And I think this episode achieves that. I'm also very curious what my American listeners will find surprising about it. So if you listen and you're American, let me know which bit of information you found most surprising. You can message me on Instagram, I'm Meredith for Real, or on Facebook, Meredith for Real, the Curious Introvert. Enjoy the show. There is no better way to observe the nuances of a culture than through the lens of romantic relationships. And my next guest has made a business out of comparing and contrasting ideas of attraction, romance, and gender roles in all different cultures. And she shares all of this on her YouTube channel with 500,000 of her subscribers. It's called Dating Beyond Borders, and she shares these in the form of short, humorous sketches. They're hysterical. Today, she's going to share lessons of love from around the world. Russian beauty, Canadian expat living large in Portugal, Marina Iakovleva. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for such a wonderful introduction.
You're welcome. I'm so glad that we could get together and that we could meet. I'm very curious to know, when did you first learning about yourself as a Russian Canadian? What did you begin to learn about yourself as a Russian Canadian when you started to travel, and even when you started to date, internationally, if you will? I'm trying to make it sound like you don't get around. I'm trying to avoid making it sound like that. Trying to make it sound very sophisticated, but you know what? My audience knows me and they know I'm not sophisticated, so I don't know why I'm pretending. So
it's okay. Don't worry about it. It's interesting, right? Because I came to Canada when I was 12, so I always get this question, are you more Russian or are you more Canadian? And it's interesting because different parts of me come out at different times. And so one very Russian part of me is that I was raised with the idea that if I go on a date, and you can probably relate, as an American, that the man pays the bill, right? Like that's a very Russian concept, or, not just Russian, but it's also a very Russian concept. And so I remember going on dates with guys. I remember I was on a date with this German guy, and, the bill came, and it was just a state of shock for me when he was, he was sitting there and, oh, well, you had this and it was $12.37 and I had this and it was, and there was nothing worse for me. Like a part of me would just die if that happened on the first date. And, so a lot of guys would always say this, well, are Russian girls gold diggers? And it's not like that for us. I guess it's a traditional process of courtship in a way that the man, can handle taking you out and paying for the bill, and that money shouldn't be an issue on the first date. But yeah, I've definitely, I think that has changed a little bit over time. Like I'm a little bit less particular about it. I guess on the first date, yes, but overall, I'm not going to be expecting the guy to pay for everything when we start dating. But I was like that. That to me was a big thing. So yeah, that I guess to me is a pretty big part of being Russian. I'm also very emotional and soulful. I guess that's a Russian quality. But to be fair, a lot of people tell me that sometimes I come off as a bit more, let's say, too passionate for a Russian, because they assume Russians are just cold-hearted, cold-blooded, blonde, tall women, which I'm not.
Yeah, that's so funny. You bring up an interesting point, because you have what the actual cultural differences are, right? And then you have the perception of the cultural difference. So it's almost like you have this one barrier, which is potentially a barrier of understanding and communicating and successfully hitting it off, being intercultural, right? But then you have the added implication of whatever they think that your culture is. So like if you're dating somebody and they think Russian women are cold-hearted, maybe blunt, then and they try to change their communication style to what they perceive you might be just because of half of your nationality. You're like, dude, I'm half Canadian. We're super nice. Okay. But you've got those barriers that come up in dating all the time. But as you said, over time, things kind of converge. And I have found that from travel and just from having friends from different cultures, you tend to adopt the best parts of maybe their language or the best parts of their traditions. That's definitely an American thing, right? That's kind of the thing in America. But have you found any particular romantic traditions or cultures or aspects of different cultures that you've decided, you know what, I'm going to keep this one?
That's an interesting question. I think I usually go the other way, where I go, oh, I could never do that. Or, you know, this is a bit too much for me. Like, it's always like, I always get the question from people, and this is the biggest one, you know, is, let's say, what is one country that you think it's amazing for dating? Or what is one country that, you know, what is one country that you would want to date a man from? And for me, it's always difficult to say. Like, there's different aspects of countries that I really, really like. For example, I love that, you know, Latin Americans are so warm, and, you know, and then there is a bit of that. There is a culture of a man approaching, and, you know, he's flirtatious. There's that passionate part that I really like. I don't like the part, and of course I'm generalizing about the Latin American dating, where you don't, you know, it's almost so easy to flirt that you don't know if you're the only person that this person is, you know, picking up. I remember when I was in Argentina, like I loved, you know, gorgeous men approaching me and you know, and starting a conversation, but a lot of it just felt so fake. You know, it was, you're so beautiful. I would do this for you. I would do this for you. And when you turn them down, I swear to God, I kid you not, they would turn to another girl, a girl I knew, and would say the same exact thing to her. So yeah, I definitely love the passionate side of Latin Americans. I love the traditional side of Texans, for example. Like if you go to Texas, I remember interviewing a guy, you know, and he was, I think he was from Houston or Dallas, and he said, look, for me, like, again, the whole ping thing comes up for some reason, but he said, like, for me, it's not a matter of, you know, expecting something in return, but it is a matter of me spending a good time with a person or with a girl, and, you know, and just, and then just making sure she has a great time on a date. I also like the European approach to dating, which is that, you know, Europeans like to put labels on things a little bit less. Like the French, for example, don't understand the concept of dating. And I love that, because I also find it really, let's say, superficial and a bit, I think you're trying to be on your best behavior when you sit across the table from someone, and all you're doing is it's an interview process, right? And it's so much harder to actually gauge attraction, and, you know, you come into this date and it's all just so pre-planned. So I do like it when you hang out with someone, you go and you do all these things, and it's not, let's say, an officially a date, that you really get to see, like, oh, do I feel attracted to this person, right?
Right.
So yeah. A few different countries, I would say.
Yeah, I think it's always good to absorb the best parts. And I think that's part of I don't know, I was going to ask you about this. How would you describe like the importance of dating outside your culture? Because I think some people, maybe I only know what I know, right? So maybe by some people, I just mean Americans. I don't know. But like maybe some people think like, oh, that's cute. Like, yeah, you wild college student, you just, give that a shot. But maybe this question is better framed outside of the world of romance and attraction. But why is it important to build those relationships with other cultures, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. I think even dating outside of your state might be like a different thing, right? Yes. In the US, like that
it totally is. Yes.
Right? Yeah. So I think it's definitely a very interesting thing to date someone outside of your culture. I think it's also a very complicated thing to date somebody outside of your culture, and which is what I've been doing for most of my life, and which is what I'm doing now. You do really get to understand what drives you in a way, right? Like you really get to start thinking about how do you communicate, how do you express yourself. It's an interesting experience for that. I mean, I would definitely suggest it. Again, there's certain cultures for me that are more compatible than other cultures. Like, I think it's great, for example, when you get, again, a Latin American and let's say a Scandinavian, and and then they're in a relationship. And I understand why the two are so often, there's so many relationships where you get those two contrasts, right? One is very cold, generally speaking, one is very warm. And of course, they're lacking that within their own culture. Like if I'm in Sweden and everybody's reserved and cold and, I crave for that passion. And on the other side, a Latin American craves for maybe a tall blonde, I don't know, with that steely exterior. The interesting thing about that there is definitely like a cool balance there. But there's also things that I'm not sure are very easy within a relationship to work around. For example, the concept of love, like for Latin Americans, is jealousy, it's passion, it's emotions. And that for them, it's like, if you don't have those feelings, you don't have this passion, it's just boring. That's not the way you showcase your feelings for someone. Whereas for a Swedish person, that's unnecessary. That's completely unnecessary. What's important is that you're a good partner and you do nice things for each other, and that's it. So, going down the road, those two are like, I'm really attracted to you, but this does not work for me. I'm tired of all the emotion that you're asking of me. And the other person's like, I'm bored because I'm not getting enough. So it's an interesting way to really understand like what you really need for yourself in a relationship. And can that other culture give it to you?
It's almost like you're learning your own love language. And I know you mentioned to me before that you had just read The 5 Love Languages, the book, which, every Midwestern church girl has read, by the way. So that's like the community of people, like we all, seriously, like it was like, I think integrated somehow into our Sunday school. It was important to know, but it was very valuable. But from a cultural aspect, you're saying that getting to know someone, romantic or platonic, is a way to learn your own love language. And so like a Swedish person might be attracted to a Latin American person, but her love language might be different than him, and it could cause a lifetime of conflict, basically.
Exactly. Like I was just interviewing an Indian girl and she's dating a Swedish guy. And, there are so many funny cultural differences that she brought up. Like, she's like, I would like to hear more specific compliments from him. I would like to hear that he thinks I'm this and this. And he just doesn't do it. And we've been together for 3 years. And, and on our second anniversary, the guy comes in and he has no flowers. And I told him, you come back and I want to see flowers. He says, give me 5 minutes. And he runs and gets her like 3 flowers just to overcompensate, I guess, for
that's so
for the lack of.
Though. Oh my gosh!
And she just said, I took flowers off the table at this point. because she just said, look, it was the effort. That's what I wanted.
Yeah, that's adorable. Okay, so if we're talking about lessons of love, I think you just hit on lesson number one, which is adjust your expectations.
I couldn't have said it better. I think that's definitely a thing that you realize to yourself, what is the most important thing, right? For you in a relationship. And then you realize what are some secondary parts, that some things that you can live with.
Yeah, and you don't really know that until you start to have interactions with people from that country. And whether it's platonic or romantic, they're just, have you heard that saying where they said, I'm going to mess this up, but they said like, to a person said to a fish in a fishbowl, hey, how's that water feel? And they said, what water? It's like you don't know what you're in because you're in it, and unless you start talking with somebody who's somewhere in something else. It's perspective.
That's exactly it. You know, when I do interviews, let's say on camera, or even right now for the book that I'm writing, I find that I get way more value from people that are, let's say, have lived abroad, or, that are not from this culture, have lived there their whole lives. If someone has lived in the US, for example, they can now say, I love this in the US. And I wish we could do this here, or I hated this in the US, and I'm glad we don't do this here. Whereas someone who has lived, in Germany their whole lives just doesn't have that perspective.
No, it doesn't. When I've done cultural comparison podcast episodes, one of my requirements for the guest is that they have to have lived in more than one culture, because you can't compare if you don't know, So if you said to me like, what's it like living in Florida? I'd be like, I mean, compared to what? I guess Nebraska. I could probably do a comparison to Nebraska, but you don't know what you don't know. And so when you're trying to figure out that process of like, okay, what is my love language? How does it relate to their actual language, their actual culture? Let's talk about faux pas, because you have this incredible video series right now about, what is it called? How to End a Date in 5 Minutes. I'm eating it up. I love it. It's so funny. And unfortunately,
Hey everyone, just a quick interruption to show gratitude to our sponsors and give you some special deals. So I don't have kids, but I also want to tell you about It's Your Magazine. They're a national family-centered publishing company with free parent magazines. They have parenting advice, events, and inspiration. I'm actually in a networking group with the publisher, and this guy is all about family. You can view a free magazine in cities in Texas, Oregon, Washington, and Florida by checking them out at itsyourmagazine.com.
the UWF Historical Trust. We shoot the show at the Museum of Commerce and the Pensacola Museum of History. And it's not just an amazing step back into the 18 and 1900s, but it's an event space too. And because they love creative collaborations and have spaces for all party sizes, they're pretty much the perfect venue to make your event stand out. So if you need a unique space in downtown Pensacola, take a look at historicpensacola.org. And if you want to tour one of the 12 museums, get your tickets in person so you can show the agent one of my emails and get $2 off an adult ticket. Get emails by texting REAL to 66866.
And INSEC. So I've always felt iffy about pesticides. Then the mosquitoes got so bad, I would get covered in them from walking from my house to the car. I called INSEC, and to say I've been impressed is an understatement. When the treatment wasn't quite doing it, the owner actually came to my house. He found the breeding sites, identified the species of mosquito, and adjusted my treatment to that species. That's when I found out he's also a beekeeper, and pollinator issues are always top of mind. So if you're in the Florida Panhandle or Gulf Coast of Alabama, give him a call, ensec.net. Now back to the show.
Although it is exaggerated, it is unfortunately not outside the realm of what could actually happen. One would just hope those things wouldn't happen all within, 5 minutes. So what's, in your experience, what are some ways that two people dating cross-culturally could learn about each other's cultures without being a future video in your series?
I always, whenever I make those videos, I always tell people like, look, this is just for entertainment purposes. I mean, no one's enough of an idiot to go into a date and blurt out all those things, I'm hoping, right? But I think it's not maybe making those mistakes or saying those things that gets people out, or, gets people out of the date. It's more that you're just not maybe curious about their culture, or that you already think you know everything about it, and that's it. I'm sure you get, let's say, as an American, that everybody has an opinion about the US without really understanding where you're from, for example. So yeah, that would be like, for example, for me, if someone comes, would come on a date and say something about Putin, which they do most of the time, I don't actually get offended. I think it's pretty funny. One of my biggest problems with doing what I do is that I tend to make generalizations about people. I think it's really one of my problems, and it's been a big problem when I was dating. I would go on a date with someone like, okay, he is from France. This is what he's going to be like. Da, 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 da. And anything that he would say or do that would confirm that, it would be a check mark. Which is just a terrible way. It's a fun way to go on a date, but you need to keep like an open mind and really understand, a little bit more about this person. But faux pas, in terms of like specific cultures that I've learned, let's say, or what not to do within different cultures.
Yeah. Or just definitely if you have any notable ones that are memorable. And even if they're faux pas maybe you've personally made, I definitely want to hear about that. But I think in general, people have a hard time asking other people about their culture. And this could be an American thing. But it's like somehow taboo to say, your last name is, I don't know. I can't think of an example, but like a Russian last name. Oh, well, tell me about that. It's just a little bit in intercultural circles, international circles, it's less of a faux pas. I have a great group of Latin ladies that I hang out with, and it's how they introduce each other. This is Maria. She's from Peru. This is Carlos. He's from Ecuador. Like it's part of the standard operating procedure. Like, forget the last name, we're going to do country of origin. Mm-hmm. But mm-hmm. for like American citizens who are American and Peruvian or American and Ecuadorian, for example, it's a different thing. So I would love, should people say, oh, tell me, I see your name is Russian, tell me about your upbringing, or like, what's some like things that people can have when they're nervous on a date that they can remember. Oh, I'll remember that question Marina taught me to not look like a goofball and mess things up, but still learn about that person's culture and show that I'm curious.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, I think it's quite simple usually. I mean, in terms of, let's say, just not making ridiculous remarks like, oh, you're from France, you're from Paris, or you're from the Netherlands, you smoke weed, this kind of stuff. I mean, most people will laugh at it, but they're just probably just so sick of hearing the same thing over and over again. The first one is, of course, interests and cultures. Like all of my videos, most of the videos that I make are all about faux pas and basically what not to do, right? So let me think if I can think of any off the top of my head of things not to do. I would say certain countries are more relaxed to it, than others. Like in certain countries, there are definitely a lot of things that you shouldn't do on the first date. For example, again, I'm going to talk about Scandinavia just because my head has been buried in writing the book for a while. But one thing not to do with Scandinavians is to brag. That's to talk about what you own. One of the things, I'm sorry for saying that, but in the US,
I'm aware. You can go ahead.
Going back
Shoot your shot. It's fine.
So Americans, obviously depending on the state, but
nope, it's all of us. It's okay.
Americans.
Oh, that was pretty good.
it's all about what you own. I'm the CEO of this corporation. I have a car. Especially people from San Francisco, they really love to do this. I mean, I work for Instagram. Now I work for Snapchat. I've heard this actually. I've had people argue over their Snapchat versus Instagram, who's better. But anyways, in Scandinavia, if you go on a date with Swedish, a Dane, a Norwegian, the last thing you want to do when you're flirting with a girl, especially, is to talk about what you own. They would rather find out from someone else who you are than you telling them. So that's something that, who you are is way more valuable than what you do. For example, there is a law of Yante that basically says they're all equal and nobody's better than the other person. But it's funny because if you go on a date, for example, with a Chinese, then it's all about status. If you're going to date with an African, it's all about appearance and status, right? So those two are just worlds away in what is attractive to someone. Latin Americans, again, it's all about, if a guy's flirting with you, it's all about the macho. It's that he's assertive, and whereas again, like a German, which is for them, the concept of macho itself is not attractive. Macho actually has a negative connotation. Being macho has a negative connotation in Germany, in the Netherlands as well. Their men are pretty passive. They would probably not come up and flirt with you. So just keep that in mind as well.
That is so fascinating. And I just eat this stuff up. I love it. And I think there's so many good applications, for life, lessons that we can learn, not just from other cultures, but just, I think from knowing other people who are different from us, whether that's from a different culture or you're in the US and you're from a different state, which, you're right, it does vary from state to state. Can you think of any overreaching lessons that you've learned over the years of doing these videos and all your travels that would apply to really the average listener, I guess?
Well, I would say if you are struggling with dating in your country and you just feel like you don't fit in, really figure out if you're able to go somewhere else. I personally have quite struggled with dating in Canada, which is why I actually started this project. I couldn't really relate. For me, it has always been Europe, and I related best to Europeans, which is why I came to Europe. And and then I met my boyfriend, let's say, who we have tons of cultural differences with, that I can talk to you about for hours. But has, let's say has qualities that work for me. And I think a lot of people are stuck with living in their small city, I don't know, Ohio, and they just hate the dating scene there, right? So I think, and before you do that, of course, definitely try to understand the culture that you're dating. I think one of the worst things we can do is we can get angry at the person instead of trying to understand where they come from. I'll tell you really quickly of an incident where, if there is a little bit of time, do we have a few minutes?
Yeah, we're good.
So again, with my boyfriend, I remember this was, a few months ago, we went out on a date and I decided to wear heels. In Lisbon, that's very hard because you get a lot of cobblestones. But anyway, so I tried it. I went my full Russian self. And I remember we went with the two friends of mine, a Russian and an Argentinian, they're a couple. And I remember this Russian guy, holding his Argentinian girlfriend's hand as she wobbled through the streets. And she was not even wearing high heels. Whereas my boyfriend did nothing. We're walking. He's not offering me his hand. I'm huffing and puffing. I didn't want to actually come out and tell him, look, buddy, give me your hands, look at me. I just wanted him to make the effort, I wanted him to guess that I was struggling. And he didn't. And finally I said, come on, look at me, I can't even walk. And he said, why didn't you just ask for my help? It was so, and then we go to a bar and they're all over each other. And we're a bit like he let's say when we go out to places and he does right now, he's, let's say, more comfortable, or we've lived together for a while now, we let's say hold hands or kiss. But in the initial stages, he would not even hold my hand when we would go out, which used to annoy me. And he told me, look, like in the Netherlands, when you go to a party, to be with other people. You don't go to a party to be with the two of you. So a lot of times in the Netherlands, you can't even tell who's a couple and who's not.
Interesting.
And for me, that was like a bit of a shock. I mean, it wasn't a huge shock because I've been doing this for 5 years before meeting him, like I knew already the concept of romance in the Netherlands is like nothing. There is no concept of romance. Like, I interviewed this one guy in the streets of Amsterdam, and he told me, like, yeah, keep it real. Like, don't turn on romantic music and try to impress the girl. Keep it honest. Keep it down to earth. Like,
okay, that just sounds
it.
lazy. Like, keep it lazy. That's what that sounds like. That's what I just heard, was keep it lazy.
Exactly. But for them, it's basically like anything that is too romantic is fake. That's not real. That, like, so for them, romance, I'm still trying to figure it out what that is, but it's very basic. It's doing things for each other. That's what it is. It's being there for each other. It's like listening to each other, but it's not, big and showy and let's say, well, romantic. But so then I would, so that was the thing with my boyfriend, is I would say, like, look, and I would tell other people, I was so noble, and I would say to others, like, look, because I know that's his culture, and whenever I get mad, I have to think to myself, that's his culture and that's him. And then I would still continue getting mad at him, and he would say, but you just told your friends that you can separate the culture and the individual. Why aren't you doing that? So it's easier said than done. Mm-hmm. I understand that. But really, before you go and you start dating an Egyptian and you expect him to behave like a Spaniard, really keep it in mind that you're dealing with a completely different culture, and that's how they were raised. And they were kids. That's what they've seen their parents do. And you're coming in and trying to change a grown man or woman to be more like you. If the values don't match with your values and it's really getting to you, like you're a family person and this person doesn't talk to their family, then love might not just conquer it all, unfortunately.
I think that's the overreaching lesson of love. Honestly, I mean, that's a bit pessimistic, but it's realistic, is love doesn't necessarily conquer all, but, feel free to meet some new people. And that is what you said. And we are running out of time, but I could just talk to you forever. But that's the challenging part about American culture, is because those things that you're talking about, those cultural nuances, those are ingrained with us and are so far back from our ancestors, but still passed on, but they're so far back, we're not that very aware of what they are, right? So like my Midwestern upbringing might have a lot of similarities with German culture. I couldn't tell you nothing about that. Like, I don't know. But if I meet somebody who is, my husband's Greek, so I pick on that a little bit, but like Greek from, way back, he might have different parts of him that he is not aware are influenced by his Greek heritage. So yeah, it's a really fascinating thing. So as we wrap up, can you tell people where they can find you, follow you, and definitely keep an eye out for your book?
Yes, definitely. They can go to my YouTube channel, Dating Beyond Borders, and check out the videos before they attempt to date someone from another culture, as well as my Instagram, same name, Dating Beyond Borders. I'm still working on the book, but when it's going to be ready, I'm going to be posting that on my Instagram as well. So stay tuned for a guide to dating in Scandinavia, where I'll be covering basically, everything from meeting people to having kids in Scandinavia. So it is interesting. It is completely different to anything that I've seen in terms of dating. So yeah.
I look forward to it. I love it. It's my favorite way to learn about cultures other than the food. The food's pretty good too. So, well, thank you, Marina. I hope that everyone does check out your content because it is A+. I love it. And I love talking with you. So awesome. That's a wrap,
Thank
girl.
you. I love talking with you as well. I wish we could talk for another 30 minutes, to be honest.
Me too.
But we'll do.
Heyo, thanks for listening. I compiled Marina's tips into a list of 6 most important things to remember when dating interculturally. To get that via email the Saturday that this comes out, text REAL to 66866. If you're outside the US, you can go to meredithforreal.com to get included on the email list. And if you liked this episode, you might also enjoy episode 32, Dating Cultural Comparison, Italy versus US. It's not my best sound quality, but the content is really great. Stay tuned next week when I talk with a traveling filmmaker and human rights advocate about lesser known LGBTQ facts throughout history.